I still believe in the principles of civil disobedience as the method for change, nonviolent civil disobedience. And most of the Iranian people so far has abided by that. But they need more help. They need more help in terms of making sure that they are not cut off from the world. So internet access is one thing. Then we need to be able to help Iranian families, particularly that of political prisoners and blue-collar workers, because I think the quickest way to paralyze the system from within are ultimately labor strikes. And we need to be able to support that. Right now, if an Iranian family that is living in Germany or in America or in Canada or anywhere else would like to send some money to help somebody inside Iran, we can't under the sanction rules and OFAC. We are limited in terms of being able to help our kind. So the problem is that the bad guys somehow make the money by undercutting the sanctions, but the good guys are unable to help each other because they are limited by means. So I think there's so many policy changes that could change that aspect, but it needs to be implemented by whatever government. In other words, America doesn't get directly involved, but there are certain things that can make it easier for us to operate. One of those elements, as I indicated, was there are a lot of frozen assets that belong to the Iranian people in the first place. And this can be a means to fund and finance many elements that will be helping the people inside
Iran. The money's not going to them. Even the frozen assets you release, you have to go through the current regime that is going to spend it. When you hear stories that Khamenei's family is worth $95 billion, is that accurate? Do you believe that?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised, because definitely the symbiosis of the mafia, that is the IRGC working with the regime, helping each other, has really enriched them, while the people are starving on the streets. Now, yeah, maybe it would be, people would say, okay, how do we actually get that done? But I believe in the principle of when there's a will, there's a way. And I think one of the things that can be done is to make it possible for Iranians to help one another. The Iranian diaspora has means to help their fellow compatriots. But if you ask them right now, can they actually help fellow Iranians at home? It's very complicated under the sanction rules. So I think there has to be some modification. So one thing that President Trump did, and again, part of your chart, he put the IRGC on the list of terrorist organization. The Europeans have yet to do that, but that was a courageous first step of indicating we know where we can hit the regime when it hurts. You can even expand on those sanctions for purposes of imposing even more pressure on the regime. But that won't be sufficient for the change we are seeking. What we are seeking is to have also a campaign of maximum support. Now, very short of what some people may assume, are we going to yet again be forced to engage or intervene militarily? So let's say we all understand that America doesn't want to go to war. I'm sure whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, nobody wants to go to war. We don't want anything to lead to a war. But let's understand one thing. The other side will continue to use every means at its disposal to force conflict, because they have lived with that all these years. If you come to think of it, Patrick, don't you think that they've been given ample opportunities since the Iran-Iraq war ended to come clean and to change? How many times we have seen succeeding U.S. administration attempting that? Let me go back to the days of Ronald Reagan. What happened after Carter lost his presidency and the hostages were taken? We are about 2 days from the anniversary of the American hostages taken in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. President Reagan dispatched Robert McFarlane with a Bible and a cake to try to humor Rafsanjani at the time. Let's not forget that. And one after the other, Bush father came and said, the world is less threatened right now, or something to that effect. And of course, that resulted with, okay, now that we don't have to worry about the Middle East, let's elect Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton came in, and then he had to face the situation in Bosnia and what have you. And then we came to later on, 9/11 happens. George W. Bush decides to take down Saddam Hussein, which actually was net lose for America, win for the Islamic Republic as a result. Then we came to the Obama era. We tried JCPOA. We saw what happened, that even after that, the regime started taking hostages and even more hostages. Then we arrive at the Trump administration. We saw some effect of his pressure and the regime backed off. Then came the Biden administration with all this appeasement and releasing money to the regime, and we have October 7th. So where are we today? At the eve of the US elections in 2024, with Iran doing what it's doing right now, the nuclear threat still be there, the Israelis having to do what they have to do, the Saudis starting to sweat as to, okay, where is America so undecisive, and what do we need to do in the meantime with the Chinese and the Iranians and what have you. All of this is at play and at stake. And then, going back to the original question that you asked, why should America care about Iran, or why should we even get involved, or is any time that we pull away from the region? The fact is that you create a vacuum. And ultimately, the biggest foe that America may have, which is, come to think of it, perhaps China, is going to take advantage of the situation and fill that vacuum with the help of the Iranian regime and have total dominance regionally, economically, and others. Is that net what America would like to face as a result? These are the kind of questions that the advisors to both candidates need to think about, irrespective of the divide between the Republicans and Democrats in this country.
I agree. I just don't know, because when I look at this, your father served roughly 38 years, right? From 41 to 79. Your grandfather served from 25 to 41, roughly 16 years, right? These guys been in office for 46 years, and they're still in there. So what does that make them better at keeping control than your father and your grandfather? Because when you look at a couple of reports, you're talking about executions. Look at this here, Rob. So 2008, Obama gets in, okay? 350 annual executions in Iran. What happens? Goes up to 402, 546, 676, 586, 687, 753. Obama's last year, he had the highest level of executions in Iran. Last year, Trump comes in, drops immediately 50%. 530, 517, 273, 280, 267. Boom. Biden comes back in. 333, 582, 834, just skyrocketing to the top. And we just have 2023 numbers. And Rob, if you can pull up some of the reports that we have on what just happened with executions, not this one. Matter of fact, let me just, let's stay on this and I'll go to the next one. Show the other chart, Rob, that shows who was the most favorable by the Iranian people. I'll give you the thumbs up on the chart that we have so you can just go to it. It's a chart that shows how favorable was the Shah, how favorable was your father, how favorable was Mossadegh, how favorable was Khomeini, and then Khamenei. And when you look at this, here's what you'll notice. The blue is very favorable. The navy blue is somewhat favorable. Gray is somewhat unfavorable. Red is very unfavorable. Green, no opinion. Look at the left. That's your grandfather, I believe. Yes, he's your grandfather. 1870, 1944. 41.4% very favorable. 17.7% very unfavorable. Let's just focus on those two numbers. Your father, 32.8%, very favorable. 18.4%, unfavorable, very unfavorable. Go to Mossadegh. A lot of people say, Mossadegh was the guy. He was the modern-day Bernie Sanders. 16.4%, very favorable. 12.7% unfavorable, right? Then you go to Khomeini, 1902 till 89. I lived 10 years in Iran under Khomeini. 20% favorable. Look at the unfavorability rate. You got 58.6% of Iranians unfavorable. Khamenei today, 20.4%, exact as Khomeini. Favorable, that's 1 out of 5. 62% of people, that's 3 out of 5, are unfavorable. Even though that's been the case since 79, they've been able to keep reign for 46 years. I mean, how are they able to do this while there's no data that benefits that they're doing the right thing for the people of Iran long term?
Well, one aspect is, of course, repression. And I would add to this chart the fact that if you look at the turnout in the most recent elections in Iran, it was the lowest ever. It was the lowest ever show of people to participate in the elections in the past 46 years that you mentioned. Again, showing the element of people moving away from the reform discourse into a change of regime discourse as a rejection of the system.
But when you say the lowest ever turnout, that's not a good thing.
No, I mean, they didn't participate in the regime's elections.
So this is the one you're talking about. Like
I'm talking about the fact that the regime itself admits that Iranians are not supportive of the regime.
No, but Iran's presidential election voter turnout, right? 39.2%, 2024.
Right.
The second closest, 48, 2021. The way I view this, and please push back, I view this as they've given up.
No, that means that they don't validate the regime or basically, the regime always tried to tell the world, look, we are popular, people are participating in our elections, which was, of course, a fallacy and a farce to begin with. But they always use that as a pretext to claim legitimacy.
Yeah,
people on purpose don't participate by saying, we boycott the elections.
No, the way I see it is the following. You know how American polls will say, Hillary Clinton's it's the favorite. I mean, it's just such a massive landslide victory, Hillary Clinton over Trump, and then Trump wins polls, right? And right now, with all these conversations that are going on, it's like, it's going to be done. It's over with. And it's like, no, you guys got to go vote. We need voter turnout, voter turnout, voter turnout. Sometimes people stop voting when they think their vote no longer matters because it's not going to happen anything. The way I read this is the Iranian people feel defeated, that their voice doesn't matter. You read this differently than I do?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Because, look, if we assume that when in countries that hold free and fair elections and candidates are not pre-vetted or pre-approved or eliminated by some kind of a filter mechanism imposed by a regime, then of course people have all the incentive to make the difference by voting their conscience. But when people know that it doesn't matter what they say, the regime is going to manufacture an outcome. We saw that at the Green Movement, what happened with Ahmadinejad and Mousavi. This is 2009.
Okay, look
roughly.
at that. No, stay on that, Rob. Go back. You see, that's the highest. That's 84.83% voter turnout.
Because they were still in the mindset of reform, despite the fact that they knew that their candidates are filters.
But the way I view that is the fact that I see 84.83 as hope, that they had hope that something could happen. 39.92 now split in half. I look at it as Iranian people have no hope right now.
Look, you're right, because if you go back to even before the Green Movement, if you go back to the days of Khatami, 21 million people in Iran voted for him.
What year was that?
This is 2019...
97? What year was
roughly,
Khatami?
Yeah.
Okay, so look at 97, almost 80%.
Well, why? Because there was a generation saying he's the first guy to talk about reform, talk about promises of liberalization and all that. They had a lot of hopes, and guess what happened? The regime started going after the students, threw them for their dormitory rooms to their death, and Khatami at the time said, don't forget one thing, I'm here to protect the regime. That was the first sign of being rejected. Fast forward to 2009. Again, the Iranian people were standing there. They were chanting slogans in English, not to practice their linguistic skills, but to send a message. Obama, Obama, ya ba una, ya ba ma, which means Obama, either you're with them or with us.
Right.
Again, another letdown.
But I'm studying this data. When you look at a leader, a voice, somebody that's able to rally and get people to go out there and want to do the work, they don't have somebody right now.
And I tell you, because the mindset there, and again, despite the fact that people knew that, they used to use the terminology انتخاب بین بد و بدتر, the choice between bad and worse.
Even worse, yeah.
Okay,
right.
That's not really a choice.
Right.
But if you're forced into it, you have to. But that, what shows in the latest statistics, I don't read the way you read it as a deflation or loss of hope. I mean it as a sign of rejection, that the regime can no longer claim legitimacy by saying, look at the rate of participation Iranians have in the election.
Yeah, but
that's our read. We may agree to disagree.
Oh, that's totally fine.
But that's our read on it.
Right.
Why? Because they are tired of this game. People said, you know what? This regime is not going to reform itself. And the reason I have to insist on this point, Patrick, is because it's the key element for world leaders and foreign governments to understand the change of dynamics and paradigm within Iran itself. Because all this time, let's not forget one thing, whether it was the Europeans or even some people here in the United States, looking at Iran was always the issue. There are elements that are more moderates, that are more reformist. Maybe we can talk sense with them. And all of that was attempted as part of that behavior change approach, that maybe we can come to terms better with those who are less hawkish or less radical than the so-called moderate elements. But at the end of the day, when you look at the behavior of the regime, irrespective of who was at the helm, the attitude was basically one and the same. So it didn't make any difference what Khamenei will pull out of his bag of tricks and say, this is the next president. Same thing with Raisi and company, all the way to the current guy. Why? Because this is not the people's choice. This is the regime choosing who they would like to bring out of the ballot box, which is a complete mockery of any elective process, which is why it's important for the votes to be counted in countries that respect the principles of free elections and free and fair elections, America included. Of course, people should participate in free and fair elections, but why should people participate in a system that doesn't even respect votes, that doesn't give people an opportunity to truly choose their own candidates?
That means you've given up on hope, though. If you were interested in this topic with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, odds are you're Middle Eastern, maybe you're Iranian, Armenian, Persian, maybe you're living in the Middle East, or maybe you're an American that wants peace in the Middle East. The last 13 years, I wrote this book called The Academy. It's a very interesting thing. I talk about his father. I talk about moments why the revolution took place with this character named Asher, who is half Assyrian, half Armenian, and he gets recruited to the secret society. And the villain in the book is the former deputy director of Savak, who is in the book breaking down why the fall of Iran took place, what mistakes that were made. And very interesting what happened when I wrote this book. I never wanted to publish this book until I finished building my insurance company. I published a couple months ago. Something very strange happened when I was at the tail end of finishing this book. I get a call from somebody saying the former deputy director of Savak wants to have a call with you. I said, the former who? Deputy director of Savak. They don't know the villain is in this book. That person had read the book. I have a Zoom with the deputy director of Savak. He reads the book, calls me back immediately. I need to have another part 2 with you. Did you write this book about me? Am I the villain in the book? I need to come and meet with you face to face. He comes to my house. My dad meets him. My wife meets him. We have an 8-9 hour meeting together at the house because of what perspective he had that caused Iran to fall. Some of that is documented in this book. Again, this is a fiction book based on true stories. If the topic of Iran, the revolution, leadership interests you, I think you would really enjoy reading this book, The Academy. You can go to Amazon or a QR code here to order the book. I look forward to having you read it and posting a review on Amazon because I read every single one of them. Enjoy the read. If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.